Hello and welcome back to Premier Injuries. Today we're talking all about Fantasy Premier League. Make sure to check out the other videos that we posted this week. Monday night's data show was, I think, a real banger. It's one that we're going to be working on through the summer, building upon that. And then, of course, we had Dr. Raj on yesterday. And, of course, as I'm mentioning the videos there, that gives you even more reason to subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you subscribe, share the videos, and give them a like as well so that we know that you're enjoying them, but it also helps us with all these YouTube algorithms. But game week 36 defence we're on today, and before we start, we got to play a bit of defensive play. We got to understand who is playing this game week. Game week 36 has a blank of 4 teams, so Arsenal, Chelsea and Leicester City along with Manchester United are blanking. Before we get into some defensive asset discussions, Ben, how are you handling this blank game week 36?
Not too bad. I had a couple of free transfers coming into game week 35, so that's helped me plan ahead. I wasn't overloaded with players who are missing out on this blank game week, so I should have 12 players who I'll be happy with under normal circumstances will start, and obviously hopeful of decent returns with a nice set of fixtures. So look, I need to be keeping it going over these remaining game weeks to keep on your coattails for when I deploy that bench boost on the final weekend, and hopefully just nose ahead of you at the finish line, because that's what it's all about. That's what it's about for me now, is purely just it's a 2-horse race. It's bragging rights for the summer between me and the Mac.
Yes, I hope there is a return of the Max form, because at the moment I've not been doing great. This game week though, I've actually had quite a good one. 83 points so far. Mason Greenwood has done absolute bits for me, and a nice green arrow there. But the reason why I ask you, obviously it gives me a bit of an insight into your team for next game week, but I have genuine problems that I will probably have maybe one player missing, so I might have to do a transfer on a player so that I actually have a starting 11 that game week. And also I do have the worries of Aaron Cresswell as well, if he is going to play, because at the moment, my team has Iheanacho, Fernandes, Shaw, Mendy and Greenwood, who are all missing out next game week. That wasn't really because I loaded triple up on Manchester United for the treble up game week. I was on a treble Man United for a little while. I liked the defence with Shaw. I thought Greenwood was a great differential and he's paid off so far. And Fernandes is just Fernandes. You got to have him in because he's like the penalty merchant. He doesn't do too much. But this is why I'm starting off the discussions with that, because you have to kind of know what your team is doing next week, put out the fires there before you can even consider any of these defensive assets. You need to know which players you will move. Is it going to be a temporary thing, or is that going to be for the rest of the season? It would be a bit silly to do one transfer for one game week and then you're going back the same game week after. It might cost you a hit, so just be very careful with how you're handling the blank game week. But yeah, let's look at the defences. We're going to go through the 6 best fixtures going towards the end of the season, and then the 5 best defenders in terms of expected points, and then there's a few more teams that we'll talk about as well. But yes, so the teams with the 6 best fixtures going towards the end of the season are Leeds, Liverpool, Sheffield United, West Ham, Crystal Palace and Newcastle United. So in terms of those teams, Ben, what do you feel about them? Because I think Sheffield United, West Ham, probably Crystal Palace and Newcastle, I don't want to own any of their defensive fixtures, whereas Leeds and Liverpool, I'm probably happy to own. I've already got one Liverpool defensive asset. Is it going to be like a double or treble up time on those Leeds and Liverpool assets?
I'm a Trent owner and very happy to do so. Brought him in just after the last international break, and that's paid dividends, in all honesty. So I've been really pleased with bringing Trent in. The issues that you may have in that Liverpool backline, if you're looking at Robinson, it's a big chunk of change to lay out there, especially when maybe you've got Nat Phillips, who's the likely starter for those remaining games. I know there's question marks at the moment over Kabak. And if he doesn't start on Thursday, it looks like it could be Reece Williams. And then, depending on his performance, it could be, like I say, it could be Williams, or Klopp may drop Fabinho in there. But I think sort of Nat Phillips would be the one that I was going for if I was going to consider a Liverpool double up. And with regards to Leeds, it's a difficult one. I think historically, I probably would have looked to maybe avoid Leeds, but Leeds have got the bit between their teeth almost, and there's a lot of. I heard from I'm not sure if it wasn't Patrick Bamford. It may have been Dallas, who came out in media reports last weekend, and he basically said, "Look, I'm sick of reading the newspapers that said that Bielsa's team tire and fatigue towards the end of the season, and that's why we have these downturn in performances and/or results." So I think within that squad internally, they're motivated just to prove people wrong. And for people like us within the community who are looking for assets who still have something to play for, then I think, that definitely appeals to me. And we know that Leeds are going to have at least, one home game in front of their home fans. Now, that in itself is going to be huge, because it's going to be their first and last game this season in the Premier League that their fans are going to be able to see at Ellen Road. So, the place is going to be absolutely jumping. And I like that. Who would I go for? I mean, Alioski, I think, pulled out a improved performance last weekend, got himself an assist. Ayling has been quite unlucky this season not to get a few more points and a couple of more goals. As an outsider, I've even looked at Llorente. There's question marks with regards to Liam Cooper. So I think, as a punt for me, Llorente may get the nod.
And with the Leeds situation, I always kind of evaluate, is Calvin Phillips going to be playing? Now, he did play a 1-minute cameo against Tottenham, but does that mean, in your mind, that he will be playing all these games towards the end of the season and offering that defensive coverage so that, I can buy just beyond Dallas? I think Dallas is the one that everybody has and should have, but going beyond that really does rest on whether Calvin Phillips is fit.
Of course, it's a tough call. And Leeds arguably coming off, certainly one of their best performances in recent times. That was a great result, particularly when Tottenham again were arriving on a high after that 4-0 victory over Sheffield United. So people were expecting big things. And long gone are the days where managers used to sort of keep faith and stick with the same 11 if that team won. And for me, I've just done my predicted lineup actually sheets today, and I had Leeds in for at least 2 changes. One of those being Rafinha to come in on the right hand side, but also Calvin Phillips as well. I mean, ahead of game week 35, Bielsa came out and he said both of those players weren't in contention. The reality was they had only had one training session with the group, and therefore they weren't fit enough and they weren't sharp enough to justify a start. We're now a week down the line, and managers now are picking their best players against and tailing it around the opposition. And if you look over the course of the season, then Calvin Phillips has been one of Leeds' standout performers, and therefore based on that, regardless of that last result, I think Phillips comes back into that starting 11.
And that gives me a lot of hope there, because we've kind of discussed this before in previous podcasts, but Calvin Phillips is so important, not only to the defence, but to the attack of that side. So if Rafinha does return, if Bamford keeps in the front line and Dallas is in there as well, that could be assisting them not only to keep clean sheets, but also attack a little bit more, especially with those good run of fixtures towards the end of the season. As said there, the best last 3 going in to that final game week 38. Now, we're going to bring the discussion on to the 5 best defenders for expected points. That comes from Fantasy Football Hub. Now, I've grouped the Liverpool ones together because I think Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robbo are both really good, creative, and they kind of fit our mould of goal scoring. Nat Phillips is in there, obviously, with that clean sheet ability, but I think he's not as comparable in terms of attractiveness, but there is that cheapness which facilitates your squad. After that, John Stones is next on that list of 5 best defenders for expected points. Dallas, Digne, and Kufal. Now, I do have my reservations over Digne and Kufal just because, with Digne, it's Everton. They have been sloppy at the back this season, but then they have put in some good performances. And Kufal has been in that West Ham defence that have actually been pretty poor in the last few game weeks. And again, kind of like the Calvin Phillips absence, there's been a lot of big absences in West Ham that have caused problems there. And then with John Stones as well, you just don't know who's going to be starting with that Manchester City lineup. You said it quite a few times, over 50% of the squad is changed each game week with the team. And if you took Edison out of that, it would be even more than that. So kind of looking at those 5 best defenders there, are any of them jumping out at you, or do you share my reservations?
The John Stones one, certainly. I tried to have a look at the City lineup ahead of this game week. We're playing Newcastle, funny enough, on Tyneside, St James's Park, and I literally have not got a clue, not one clue whatsoever. Just to put something in perspective, I think Manchester City have played 57 games this season, and only once has Pep named an unchanged team, and that was back in October when Manchester City played Porto in the Champions League. So there's been rotation throughout. One positive, I dare say, that we could possibly take from last game week, although there was a host of changes from their Champions League fixture to their league game, there was only one actually from the game week to game week. So there was only one change there. But having looked at that starting 11, I can't see Pep going with that, that same 11 once again. For me, obviously the league's over and done with. So, there's an opportunity there for Pep to play this out in a couple of ways. Manchester City don't have the pressures of the fixture schedule anymore. So he can either maybe use this Newcastle game as an opportunity to play some of those fringe players, get it out the way, and then the next 2 league games, focus on tailoring his squad for that Champions League. Or because that they've got that required amount of rest and recovery between the league matches now, why not just go out full bore, go to win the last 3 matches, make sure that those players who are probably going to start in that Champions League final, are in tip-top condition, and they're playing regularly and they're playing at a high level. And like I say, and just drilling down on maybe that 13 or 14 players who are going to be in and around that starting 11 for that, Champions League game against Chelsea. But, we're talking about Pep Guardiola here, so anything can happen. If it was the former, then John Stones alongside maybe Ruben Dias would be the preferred central partnership. But, we've seen Nathan Ake and Laporte. He could switch up the formation and drop Walker in there, Cancelo. So, that's just a bit of a... we'll have to see what happens after Friday night and then make our assessments after that. With regards to Soufal, look, I think for me and for West Ham, it's just about getting over the line now, by hook or by crook. And if that means throwing caution to the wind and going out and having to score and relying on somebody like Lingard and Antonio, Bowen to grab your goals, then all be it. On the understanding you might concede one, so that's a concern. For Digne and our own Digne, Everton are great if all their remaining matches were away from Goodison Park. It's at home that have their major problems. So, I know he is an expensive defensive asset, and quite rightly so when you're given ordinarily what his attacking outputs are. But we haven't seen much of that in recent times. But I'm happy to keep the faith because I own him. Would I be going out and buying Digne? Not necessarily so. I know you mentioned Dallas, and yeah, look, he's the obvious one. He's the one that everybody should really be getting in their squad. Based on what he's producing and playing in that advanced role out of defence. Anybody else? Yeah, I think we're pretty much covered it. Really, there's it's going to be a very difficult time. I mean, we look at Nuno last weekend, for example. A manager who inherently doesn't rotate and change a lot of players. He made 5 changes for that game against Brighton. He brought in the likes of Kilman and dropped Cias. He brought in Hoover and he dropped Semedo. 2 decisions that you would never seen coming. I think there was also Gibbs White came in and he dropped Traore. And that might be, a blueprint for a lot of managers now who, like I say, are already got one eye on next season and will maybe look to blood some youngsters, get some experience, get some minutes in an environment that's almost pressure-free. Like I say, the gloves are off now. There's no crowd really there at the moment. Positions have been finalised more or less. So, why not go out and risk a few players ordinarily that you wouldn't ordinarily do, because it's going to be the best time for that to happen.
And with this kind of discussion point there of almost the gloves off, going out, maybe playing more attacking football, as I know we repeat it every week, but do check out the videos and the articles that we put out on there being so many more goals towards the end of the season. We kind of said that the template is a goal-scoring defender, whereas earlier on in the season you'd go clean sheet first and then goal-scoring ability on top of that. But clean sheets are kind of few and far between at the moment, and the likes of Dallas, TAA, Kufal are the ones that are going to be involved in assists or goal scoring. And just looking at it, so analysing those defenders that probably do have a little bit of a chance, or maybe even more than a little bit of a chance of a clean sheet, but they're all quite high in expected goal involvement as well. Dallas is right up there with 1.21 over the last 4. Kufal is just behind with 0.93. Trent Alexander-Arnold is third with 0.81. Luke Shaw, 0.78, but he doesn't play this game week, so there is that worry. Tarkowski, he's up there, and he does have that ability on dead ball situations, but he doesn't have that ability in terms of creativity. So I probably would err away from him. And in Castagne, again, somebody that misses out this game week, but maybe the game week after, with Leicester pushing for top 4. They'll want to secure that. They'll not want it to slip away, even though it's pretty much there now. They'll still have those little bit of doubts and be watching over their shoulder at West Ham United. Now, another kind of discussion point that I wanted to bring to you was actually maybe defences that might see a clean sheet. And I've analysed the top half teams that are actually matching or beating their XG conceded. So you kind of always want to go with a top half team defensively, ones with low XG conceded. And then you want to go with those that are actually meeting or beating the XG conceded because they're in good form, their goalkeeper or the defenders are playing well, stopping good quality chances. An interesting list has occurred. It's Brighton, Liverpool and Everton who are playing this game week, and then also Arsenal are a team that are not playing this game week but are meeting that criteria. Brighton, again, kind of repeating our sentiment through the season. They're bloody unreliable, aren't they? The Seagulls, they seem to take the piss a little bit sometimes. Liverpool, we've mentioned, so we won't go over them again. And Everton, you've kind of discussed with Digne. But Arsenal are in there, top half of the table defence, beating their XG conceded. I mean, would you give any attention to Arsenal or Brighton, or have they just been too poor this season?
The issue that I would have with Brighton, they've lost Lewis Dunk now for 2 games, so he begins his suspension. A little bit higher up the pitch, I know they've lost Mupai as well, but particularly in that back line, it's there will be a heavy reliance on trying to get Joel Veltman back. He missed out last weekend due to a tight cough. Now, Graham Potter could only commit to having, to giving Veltman an outside chance of returning. If he does, he is able to slip in at centre back, as he did do. I think it was back in October, in November, when Dunk served his first suspension. So that would be big. If that doesn't happen, then we're likely to see Brighton shuffle the pack and maybe move from a back three with two wing backs to maybe something more orthodox, like a 4-4-2. And I just don't like Brighton as much as that when you start maybe tinkering too much with the team. I think Lewis Dunk in itself is a big enough loss. And, Veltman has been one of the standout performers, particularly. I think, he's been in and around that back line ever since Tariq Lamptey picked up his ongoing hamstring issues. And when we talk about Arsenal, again, I'm just not convinced with Arsenal whatsoever. Again, question marks about who's actually going to start in that back line. It's centre back. David Luiz should be on the cusp of return. He's back in training. You've got Pablo Mari. You've got Chambers. You've got Gabriel. Then it's on the right hand side you've got Bellerin. On the left he's been playing Saka. You've got Tierney. I mean, none of them hold any kind of massive appeal. If I was pushed to maybe look at somebody, it might be Tierney. But other than that, I'm not really totally sold on the idea. Mikel Arteta said, there will be big changes. We know that there've been, 6 players rumored to be up for sale. They're looking to generate funds. They need some investment. I think there's a lot of dead wood, a lot of big personalities in there that just need to go. And I don't think it's a happy camp overall. And again, like I say, for that reason, Arsenal are a void for me, regardless of the fixtures and whatever predicted, points tally each player comes with it.
And just bring it back to our own Premier injury data. Arsenal and Brighton are both teams with nothing to play for. Brighton are safe. They've kind of met their target. They do want to get top 10, but that's probably not possible this season now. And Arsenal, they're out of Europe. They realistically won't get into Europe in terms of places as well. They've got nothing to play for. Some of the players, as you mentioned, they might be playing for a contract or their future and trying to convince the manager. But on the pitch, they don't have anything to fight for. Whereas some of the other teams that we're talking about, Liverpool, Everton, they've got aspirations for Europe. Realistically, they're on the cusp of it. So they're going to be fighting hard. And Leeds, I think, kind of transcend that. They're such a hard-working Bielsa team that, like Stuart Dallas said, this team doesn't give up, even though that their season is almost over. They're going to be fighting to the last day. And in tomorrow's attacking kind of discussions, you've mentioned as well that for a lot of FPL players, the season is coming to an end. But you kind of want to identify teams that are still fighting towards the end of this season so that you can build into next season. But I think to finish off, we're going to talk about a team that maybe you might want to avoid next season because they're really, really struggling. It depends who they bring in as a new manager. But Tottenham, at the back, dreadful. My question to you, Ben, is do you think that this is going to affect their attack towards the end of the season, or are they kind of doing the Kevin Keegan approach of really going out there, nothing much to play for? They might try and get Europe, but struggle at the back, but give other teams hell in their defensive back line with going all-out attack.
I think the problem is with Tottenham, you're so heavily reliant on Harry Kane, fundamentally. And for me, we looked upon this return to performance data, and we put something out there last weekend, and of course everybody fired back when Kane blanked, and we said, well, does it come as any great surprise? No, it doesn't, because when he comes back from injury, typically what we see a downturn in XG conversion of somewhere up to like 54%. And the first thing people got thrown, well, that's VAR's fault. He was a millimeter offside, or it shouldn't have been disallowed. Look, he blanked. He didn't score. There you go. End of story. So, and if you're not scoring up top, if Harry Kane isn't firing on all cylinders, and maybe Heung-min Son isn't quite at the races, and Gareth Bale, he's been sporadic in his performance and his deliveries, then the pressures are always going to be on that back line. I'm not a huge fan of Serge Aurier. I must admit, he's all right going forward defensively. Poor. Eric Dyer's come back in, to that, central defensive unit alongside Toby Alderweireld. He was bang out of favour under Mourinho. It looks like Davinson Sanchez has just been sort of pushed to one side, way down the pecking order. No, for me, again, there's not a lot to like there in Tottenham. I do actually own Relion, but at the minute he's just been nothing more than a bench warmer. I've got no confidence in Tottenham being able to go out there and either give teams, a good old turning over or keeping a clean sheet. So much so, I was quite taken aback by the win over Sheffield United. I thought it was completely out of going against everything that I had thought about how the team had been playing. And I thought their performance at Leeds was much more of what I expected. And yeah, like I say, while a lot of people sort of bigged up that Leeds performance, it didn't really come as any huge surprise to myself.
And the data would back up everything that you said there, Ben. They're second from bottom in terms of XG conceded over the last 4 game weeks. 11 goals conceded. Absolutely appalling for the usual standards, but they're well in the bottom half. They're in the bottom 6 for goal attempts conceded in the box, and big chances conceded. They're just allowing too many of them as well. Only Sheffield United, Newcastle, Southampton and Crystal Palace have done worse than them over the last 4 game weeks. So they're a team to avoid, and I think it does affect thinking around Harry Kane as well. That's why I brought him out. I'm a little bit worried. You mentioned the return to play thing. He has been injured, but just the whole team seems to be in a real mire at the moment. And we kind of talk about form and fixtures and data, and just at the moment, all of them are free combining together to me in my head. No, you shouldn't be really kind of evaluating them, because they've got Wolves, they've got Aston Villa, and then they've got Leicester at the end of the season. But those could go either way as well. You just really don't know what Tottenham team is going to turn up. But hopefully we did turn up for you all today with our defensive analysis. Make sure to tune into tomorrow's video as well. That's going to be on FPL attacks. And then also later in the week on Friday, we will be dropping the Q&A session. So make sure to get your questions in as well. Very important, because that show is all about your worries, whether it be injuries or whether it be about tactics or just FPL in general. Send those questions in. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, because not only have we got great content coming out Monday to Friday during the season, but all through the summer as well. Great content coming for you. So I'm going to hand it over to Ben to sign us out.
Yeah, cheers, Jay. Really enjoyed that. Thanks a lot. Food for thought heading into those 3 remaining fixtures. And if we touched it at the top of the show, if you've missed the 2 videos that went live this week, honestly, 2 crackers there. We picked up some great data. We also spoke to the fantasy doc himself about the Callum Wilson injury, and also load management, in particular to focus on maybe Manchester United and their triple game week, and how FIFA Pro are flagging players in the critical zone if they're playing once, within a 5-day period. So, look, a lot of good points to raise. Leave your feedback, comments below. We read everything, and we'll try to do our best in tailoring our content going forward and listening to what you say. But keep your eyes and ears peeled. We'll have defensive assets which will drop, and we'll closely followed by attacking assets. But for now, we're done.